First webinar of the day, the cross-check method and research. We are so thankful that you have joined us this Monday morning. And we are excited to share with you a couple resources and another example of how to use the cross-check method with our new standards. So, Mandy, okay, so thank you. So if you've been with us in this series, we've already had 2 webinars with the cross-check method. We've gone through the foundations of literacy and the applications of reading with a K1 example and a 3-5 example. Today, you're going to get a middle school example with research, and then March 18th, we have the 4th of these cross-check method webinars, and that will be a high school example with the written and oral communications strand. So we wanted to make sure that we gave lots of variety in these 4 webinars and that you had lots of examples that you could walk away with. So I just want to make sure you know there's another one of the cross-check method coming up. And if you missed any of the others, they are available on our professional learning library. If you can't find them or don't know how to access that, just let us know. We'll make sure you get that. We're going to start with some introductions. My name is Brenna McCormick. I'm the Secondary Education Associate for ELA in the Office of Assessment and Standards on the standards side of the office. I have some colleagues with me today. I have Mandy Hawker, who is our Elementary Associate, Tabitha Hughes, who's our Middle School Associate, and Casey Prince Harvey, who is the Humanities Associate in ELA Support. So we are thankful to all be here today. I am going to drop in the chat a note catcher as well as our attendance. If you'll take just a moment to mark attendance. And let's see, Claudia asked is today middle school. So yes, today is a middle school example, but we are doing a preview of the research strand in general first. And then, of course, the cross-check method is a strategy that will work for any grade level, any of the strands. So it's always valuable. Again, you want to open up that note catcher. You can feel free to use it as we are working today. It does have several links in it that you may want to be able to access. And then our attendance form is also in the chat. All right. Mandy, you'll click to the next slide. All right, we have we have a purpose that we have set for today, and that is to equip and prepare educators to implement the 2023 standards with intention, precision, and discernment, increasing instructional efficacy and maximizing student success. That's a lot of really jargony words, a lot of educational jargon there. So I want to break down some of the words that I think are particularly important before we get started today. Intention. When we have a determination to act in a certain way, we have resolve. Precision, that means exactness, the degree of refinement with which an action is performed. Discernment, the quality of being able to grasp and comprehend what may be obscure, the ability to understand those inner qualities of relationships. Instructional efficacy. You probably have heard of teacher efficacy or collective teacher efficacy, which is, teachers' belief that we can make a difference for all students. I have no doubt that all the teachers in this meeting believe that they can impact all students. So I really want to focus on instructional efficacy, which is the collective belief and confidence that a group has in its ability to design, implement, and facilitate effective instructional strategies. So I want you to think for just a second, how do intention, precision, discernment, instructional efficacy work together to maximize student success? How do these things apply to you? Where do you see your strengths? Where do you see maybe areas for growth? And why is this a purpose that we've set for this meeting today? So take a moment. You can do box 2 on your note catcher to type in your response, or you can just type it in the chat. No worries, Sophia. All right, I'd love for someone to share. You can unmute, you could put it in the chat. What are you thinking about this purpose for today? Yes, Mary, that purposeful instruction. If we're not doing things on purpose, we might not get the desired outcome. You're exactly right.
I feel like the teachers have to be very intentional with their teaching, looking at the data and being able to dig into the standards. We see a lot of surface area teaching with the standards, but not actually digging deep into the standards. And so that has been a problem with us, especially with our veteran teachers, actually, digging down deep and going, especially in the older grades. I'm in elementary school, but that's where we're seeing some problems. So we're in our PLCs, we're talking about specific intentional things that we need to drive our instruction. So I think this is very important.
Yeah, I love that. I love that phrase. What'd you say? Surface area teaching. I love that. And sometimes I think maybe with the amount of standards and indicators that we previously had, we felt like that was the only way to get it all done. But I like to say now, there's the standards have been reduced by like 56%. That's 44% more time to teach, right? And more time to really dig in and get in there. So I love that. I love in the chat, Brandy says that that intentionality helps us with accountability. None of these work in isolation. So I absolutely agree and feel like these are some words that maybe we can tuck away and really use as a foundation for us as we move forward in implementation. So as we get started, a couple objectives that we have. First, I want to spotlight the research strand, explore a process to break down indicators for effective instruction. And then we're going to develop a plan to apply today's learning. And then for our success criteria, this will be a success if you walk away being able to name the 5 indicators within the research strand, use the cross-check method to plan for instruction, and then identify one next step that you want to take. All right, so let's start with an overview of the research strand. Research strand has 5 indicators. So again, there's one standard, 5 indicators: investigating and refining knowledge, credibility, relevance, synthesis, and citations. So what's missing? Is there anything from the 2015 standards that you're like, where did that go?
Inquiry.
Yes, inquiry, right? Inquiry's missing. Does that mean that students aren't going to be making inquiries anymore? No, of course not. The writers of the standards made an intentional shift away from thinking of inquiry as separate from research. Inquiry, or that curiosity-based question asking, is just part of the research process. Right at the beginning, it's a way for students to have structure in their initial research. It's a natural part of research as a process. So don't think that we have said students aren't asking questions, there's no inquiry. It's just embedded within that entire research process. So if we look a little closer at our standards map, or at least a little snippet of our standards map, you'll see, again, research has one standard with 5 indicators. Over in the 4th column, it tells you what grade bands each of those indicators starts and ends with. So investigating and refining knowledge begins in kindergarten and moves through English 4. Credibility begins in second, moves through English 4, and then relevance, synthesis, and citation began in fourth grade and move through English 4. So I wanted to give you a little bit of flexibility and choice in exploring the research strand more in depth. So I'm going to give you 3 documents, and if you have your note catcher open, you also have these links already in your note catcher. You're going to have the research support document, the explanation of strands, but just the research portion, and then a research vertical articulation. And I want you to take a few minutes to choose just one of those documents and read the document, skim or scan it. Probably don't have time to read the full research support document, but put your eyes on it. And then I want you to reflect on any new learning takeaways or instructional insights. And then after about 5 or 6 minutes, I'm going to stop us, and I'd like for everyone to put one reflection in the chat. So that's going to be the end goal for this activity. So I'm going to place those 3 documents in the chat. Again, you only have to choose one. I'm going to give you 6 minutes. So let's say at 10:48, we will come back with everyone's reflection in the chat. About 2 more minutes. Might want to start thinking about what your takeaway is going to be. If you will, you want to drop maybe one of your takeaways in the chat, but also I'd like to hear from maybe one or two people. What's something you noticed, you liked? What did you look at? Yes, Robin. Does not always have to be a written essay. Research is a continual process. Yes, should be referenced more than once. Guiding questions are in the research support document. Yes. There's grade brand expectations. Yes. And for my K2 folks who are wondering why is there not a K through 2 expectation? Just know that that is something we have revised, and within the next couple of months, we'll be republishing the research support document to include K2 expectations. Yes. Very good.
I just
Yes,
like that.
Claudia. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just like that it allows the student to start being, advocating for their own research. In years past, we've always told, but now we're teaching them, I mean, which is going to help them be better citizens, because whenever you can digest the information around you and everything's, text depend, like everything is text, even if it's media, it's still text that you need to interpret. And just being able to be more proactive with their own learning, I love the new standards. I'm so happy with them.
Well, good, and thank you for that. We're actually going to talk about that, really life preparedness in just a few minutes, of just how important it is. You're exactly right, spot on. So thank you for that. Couple more things in the chat. Citing sources. Yes, that's an overarching expectation. Yeah, student interaction with content, skills that students are going to be gaining in elementary. Absolutely. Excellent. So I hope you found that to be valuable. And also, now that you have the links to all 3 of those documents, if you'd like to go back and look at others after our webinar today, you can do that. So here are a couple things that I found, and I think you'll notice that there are also things that you found, that there is one standard with 5 indicators. R1 1.2 is beginning in 2nd grade, 1.3 through 5 is in 4th. Inquiry leads to the research process. The vertical articulation shows the development of the research process. Somebody mentioned vertical articulation in the chat. The research process is based on developmental readiness, and then something that several people also mentioned is it's short and more sustained research. So not everything has to end in a 5-paragraph essay or a science fair project type, response. It can be short as well. So very good. Love that part too. So I want you to stop just for a second before we dive into the cross-check method and picture a student in your classroom as a researcher. If we were to provide instruction with fidelity around these standards, around the research standard and indicators, what would your students think, feel, say, and do? And why are these skills important? Take a moment. When you're ready, you can drop your thinking in the chat. Mary, yes. They're going to become an authority on the topic. Love that. Communicate through many modes of expression. Finding reputable sources at an early age, so important. I have a 4-year-old who came home the other day asking me about TikTok. Why? Why are you asking me? You're 4. First of all. Secondly, no. Third, I need her to know what to believe and what not to believe. Questioning, researching, checking for credibility, student engagement in their own learning. Love that. Yes, absolutely. It makes a difference in the lives of our students and, quite honestly, our future as people. For students to learn about the research process, to question, to pick credible resources, make independent decisions. It's really not at all about the word research or even a research process in its entirety. It's the skills that we're teaching students to be able to do. Imagine a world where students didn't question, where they didn't know how to determine which kind of source was credible. We could be in for some trouble. Very good. Thank you. All right. So now that we've kind of taken a minute to look at the research strand, let's hop into the cross-check method. If you've been with us, you've seen this before, but we're going to reflect one more time. And if you haven't been with us, then I'd love to hear your insight. In just a moment, you're going to see what we might consider the front matter to the cross-check method, kind of set you up, let you know what this method is and what this template is for. And I want you to type in the chat or unmute and say, which words draw your attention? Intentional. One of the words we've already discussed today, rigor. Yes. Thoughtfully. Rigor. Aligned. Sequence. Template. Instructional partners. Yes. Teachers have a bad habit of putting themselves in silos, right? Learning objectives. Excellent. So if you have not seen the cross-check method before, it is a template that you can use to quote unquote break down an indicator and really get behind what the intent of that indicator is and content and skills and rigor. This is a lengthy and in-depth, thorough process for sure. And so I like to preface it by saying we State Department, nobody expects you to do this with every single indicator. We recommend that choose indicators that maybe are brand new for your grade level, maybe ones that you're a little bit like, not really sure what this actually means or what I'm expected to do here. Maybe ones that you're like, I really enjoyed teaching this from the 2015 standards, so let me dig in and see what I might need to shift to make it align with the 2023 standards. So pick indicators to do this method with, you know, with some discernment. We don't want to do all of the indicators because I think that might be a little stressful. So we want to use this as a tool to really dig into the indicators that you might need a little help with. Mary, that's funny. Okay. So what does cross-check mean? So the first C is for the content and skills. The R is rigor and questioning. O is objectives. S, the first one, success criteria and assessment. Then you have the second S, which is sequence of mini lessons. And then finally, your check mark stands for checking for alignment and reflection. So as you're thinking about these 6 steps of really thinking about an indicator, breaking it down, and turning it into a lesson plan or an instructional series, what do you think is the most important step and why? And how do these already, maybe align with the way that you plan currently? Got to know the content and the skills to be able to drive the rest. They all align to each other, absolutely. Backwards design, yes, absolutely. And the next slide will show you that the template can kind of be viewed into 3 separate pieces. And that's exactly where we were thinking when we were coming up with this method, is that you have to know the destination, right? In order to draw the map. If we don't know where we're going, doesn't matter if we, which journey we step, where left foot, right foot, doesn't matter. Okay. The destination includes that content and skills, the rigor and questioning, the objectives, success criteria, and assessment. That's what we handle first. We got to know where we're going. Then we can write the map. And that's our sequence of mini lessons. And note that when you're using this template, you can have as many or as few mini lessons as you want. It's just whatever's going to address that content and the skills and the rigor of your selected indicator. And then finally, you have a check for alignment. And that's after you develop that series of lessons. You want to stop before instruction and say, okay, is this really aligned? Have I really met the intent of the indicator that I chose? And then after you teach the instructional series, you want to reflect and say, what worked? What didn't? Do I need to step back and punt? Do I need to pull some small groups together? Both of those last pieces are incredibly crucial to make this a successful use of your time. So let's hop into an example. You do have this example linked on your note catcher, but I'm going to walk through it step by step for you, starting with the content and skills. So again, this is a middle school example. I chose 2 indicators actually within one. And it was funny because the next webinar you'll see with communications, Casey Prince Harvey's going to present that, and she chose just like a sub indicator, like a ABC. She chose B. So you can see that this method can really be used however you need it to be used. For me, I'm using 2 indicators. Maybe it's just a sub indicator. Maybe it's just 1 indicator, but you make it work how you want it to work. So this is obviously research 1 because there's only 1 standard, and my 2 indicators are 1.2 and 1.3. So we're going to be talking about credibility and relevance. So that is where our focus is. So the first thing that we want to do is really break down the content and skills that the indicator asks us to address. So over in content, this is your nouns, credibility, sources, topic. Again, I'm pulling this vocabulary straight from the indicator. On the right-hand side, I have my skills, which are like the verbs: determine, consulted, use, relevant. And the first thing I want to do is check the glossary. We have an excellent, excellent glossary for these standards. And I want to know, what does the glossary say these words mean? So starting with credibility, I've pulled that definition from the glossary. I pulled sources, determine, and relevant, all from the glossary. But there are also some definitions in other documents that are not necessarily in the glossary. So look at the word topic. We have defined that word. It's not in the glossary, but it is in the research support document. So I have that resource to pull from as well. So every word that I could possibly define with true indicator intent I have put here so that moving forward, when I'm working with students, this is the language I use. Once we've broken up content and skills, we know our vocabulary and our definition, we want to step back and think about the rigor of the indicator and what is it asking us to do. In this particular 2 indicators, really it could be level 2 or 3, depending on where you go with the task that you give students. Ultimately, they're determining credibility of sources and then determining whether or not information within those sources is relevant to whatever topic they're researching. So it could be a 2 if you are just asking students to identify key criteria for credibility and relevance, recognize reliable sources. But if you push students beyond that understanding to really apply critical thinking skills to analyze, evaluate information by considering things like bias, reliability, accuracy, that's going to move to a level 3 DOK. And you'll see throughout the example that we are, in fact, moving students to level 3. Then you want to consider questioning. You may have seen this graphic before, but this is some data from the South Carolina Teaching Standards 4.0 responses from teacher evaluations. And blue indicates how many times that was maybe reported as a concern by an evaluator. And you can see that the highest is, in fact, questioning, right? And it's not that we don't ask questions, because we ask questions all the time. It's that we might not ask the most intentional questions or questions that are specifically aligned to the indicator or the goal that we have for that particular lesson. So we can think about shoring that up a little bit by using 2 types of questioning. We can use our collaborative discussion questions, and we can use text-dependent questions. So collaborative discussion questions are those that really guide students to engage in conversations about a text. So these push students to talk to each other, right? They can present their ideas, they can elaborate on them, they can respond to each other. These are usually opinion-based questions that don't really have a right or wrong answer. So what's your first reaction? What do you think are the most important details? What does this text help you think about? How is your understanding like the others in your group? But then we have text-dependent questions, and these require students to provide evidence directly from the text in their answers. These are directly aligned to indicators, so they will use indicator language. Those words that we pulled out in the content and skills, that's where these words go. And you'll notice a stark difference in your collaborative discussion question examples and your text-dependent question examples. How does the author's choice of words shape the tone of the text? How does the author's use of personification impact meaning? How does the setting impact conflict? Those are obviously going to be more rigorous and more cognitively complex questions. And students may have difficulty answering those, especially, for the first time you show them a text-dependent question. So how do we bridge the gap? How do we move students from talking to each other? Because we all know when SC Ready or the EOC hits, we can't just say, okay, kids, turn and talk, right? Have a little conversation about these questions, because then we're all going to testing jail. Can't do that. So how do we bridge the gap? We make a plan for it. We create intentional indicator-aligned plans for scaffolded questioning so that we can move students from the turn and talk to the successful independent answering of those text-dependent questions. And they've talked to each other so much throughout the year that by the time they get to that summative assessment, they don't need to turn and talk because they're having those conversations on their own in their head. So let me show you an example. This has nothing to do with our indicator that we're currently doing the example of. We're pausing out of that for a second just to look at what this might look like. So the indicator for this example is AOR 1.2, figurative language, mood, tone, and meaning. I might take that indicator and just literally put it into question form, because remember, our text-dependent question needs indicator language. So how does the author's use of figurative language impact the tone of the text? Now, if you're a 7th grade student and your teacher gives you this question, what are some words that may say, I'm not sure about that? I don't know what that word means, or I can't answer this because, you can pop those in the chat. What's going to be possibly a stumbling block? Tone, impact. Yes. Yes. Yep. Maybe even figurative language, right? They may know what figurative language is, but not in how you're asking them to use it. So these things that I identify as possible stumbling blocks for my students, those are the words that I want to develop collaborative discussion questions for. I want students to turn and talk about these terms without the indicator language, so that once they realize they have that content knowledge, I can then name it with that fancy ELA language. So some examples might be, how does this text make you feel? What words make you feel that way? Well, I'm really asking them to talk about mood, tone, author's word choice, but they don't know that yet, right? And once they have those conversations, I can say, what you all were just talking about was tone and author's word choice. And then they have that exposure to the indicator language. Another CDQ, did your feelings change at any point in the story? What made them change? Now I'm asking about tone and impact. Where does the author make an exaggeration? How does the exaggeration make you feel? Now I'm asking about tone and figurative language. They can have these conversations and answer these, low risk, low stakes questions in conversation, get that success under their belt, and then we name that for them in indicator language. Hear me say, you cannot live in CDQs forever. This is a scaffold, right? We get students talking about the content, we name it with indicator language, and then as we move forward, that indicator language becomes the collaborative discussion. So there's an example. So let's look at how we did this with our research example. My text-dependent question is really a prompt. Using the provided resources and research topic, determine the credibility of each source. Then determine which information within the credible sources is relevant to the topic. So that's my end goal for them. That's what I want students to be able to do independently by the end of my instructional series. If I gave them a set of resources and a topic, could they decide which ones are credible, and then find information that is relevant within those credible sources? So coming up with some collaborative discussion questions, I might ask them, what makes something trustworthy? Do the sources you're looking at give you only one perspective? Who was the source written for? Is there evidence to support what the author says? What type of evidence? What ideas might be related to your provided topic, and do you see any of those ideas in the sources? Again, pushing them towards thinking about credibility and relevance without actually using that language at first. Moving into my objectives. Again, this is for my end goal, my text-dependent question. What do I want them to be able to do independently at the end? I want them to review a selection of provided sources, determine the credibility of each source, and then determine what information within each credible source is relevant. Notice that the learning objectives include indicator language. This is where we're making sure students know, hey, these are the words you have to know. This is the indicator language. You should be able to do this independently by the end of this unit. When we get to the success criteria, and really thinking about our assessment, this is where we push towards maybe a more student-friendly version. Students can't give us what they don't understand. So we should use our success criteria as a way to make it as clear as possible what our expectation is for them. So in my lesson, my end goal, my end product is going to be a credibility and relevance report. Students have their criteria right here. I might turn this into a rubric where I'm asking them to take each source and evaluate for authority, accuracy, verifiability, bias and objectivity, currency and timeliness, and scope and depth. Now, where did those come from? the research support document. Just part of, and it's not all of the things that you can use for credibility, but it's a few. And so I pulled a few, and that is what I'm going to teach specifically. There's my, 6 mini lessons right there. And then I'm going to have students then evaluate using those 6 criteria. The next thing I'm going to ask them to do is to find at least 2. Notice the specificity there. Students know what I'm expecting. At least 2 pieces of relevant information from each credible source. And then finally, they're going to have some autonomy over how they present their report. So they'll create a report to share their findings, and it's a student choice of product. They could write me an essay if they wanted. They could come up with a written report. You could do a slides presentation, make me an infographic. It doesn't matter how you get me the information as long as you have done points 1 and 2. The next is the sequence of mini lessons. So that's a big ask. Doing this credibility and relevance report, that's a big ask. So how am I going to get students prepared for that? So in my sequence of mini lessons, I decided I was going to do 8 mini lessons. The first would be about the credibility and authority, then accuracy, then bias, then timeliness, then scope and depth. Then I'm going to do one just on information relevance. How do we decide what is relevant and what isn't? My 7th mini lesson is a model of how to complete a credibility and relevance evaluation. So what might a report look like? And then my 8th mini lesson would really be a partner practice. Do this with a partner. I like to joke that, that I do, we do, you do. I have to put a y'all do in there after the we do. I like for them to work in partners before doing it independently. And then after that instructional series, they will complete their report for me. So my mini lesson or my lesson plans include 4 pieces. We start with a connection, then go into a mini lesson, and then we have a way for students to demonstrate understanding and then reflection. So my connection for this mini lesson 3 of 8 would be to give students a variety of source examples. Everybody gets one, and half of them are obviously biased and half are objective. And then I want students to read that source and answer some questions. Once they've done that, they're going to turn and talk with a partner or small group and decide whether any of the answers to their questions impacted whether or not they trusted the information they were given. From there, I'm going to model how to evaluate 3 sources. So a news article, a website, and a video. We do want to expose them to multiple media formats. And again, this is my bias and objectivity lesson. So we're going to look just for bias and objectivity. I want to note language, tone, how information might have been selected, and then how it was presented. And then after modeling this process for students and using those terms, bias and objectivity, throughout my mini lesson, as a class, I want us to define those 2 words, bias and objectivity. Moving into the demonstrate understanding, students will essentially complete what I just modeled for them using a graphic organizer. They will be asked to justify their findings with evidence from the source, and then each group would have the opportunity to share 2 findings with the class. Finally, we'll follow that up with reflection and closure. And what I'll do is give students the glossary definition of bias and objectivity, and then ask them to compare that to the class definitions that we created. We'll make updates as necessary to include any missing details. And then their final exit slip would be to respond to the question, why does bias or objectivity in sources matter to a researcher? And I always like to end a lesson with a transferable thinking point, like how does this transfer to me in the real world? So why does this matter? So again, that's just one lesson of those 8. And once I've completed all 8 lessons, I would stop and I would say, or once I've written all 8 lessons, I would stop and I would check for alignment. It does align with the skill, the content, the rigor. I know that I will need to have a wide variety of credible and not credible sources in multiple media formats. I also know that I could potentially pull in some communication indicators here, whether those are speaking or written communications. And I could reach out to a social studies partner, see if he wants to collaborate, because this is not just an ELA skill, right? Primary sources, secondary sources, can we trust them? Um, Once that I have done those things in my reflection, I've taught all my lessons, given the assessment, I've gotten back my reports. I want to reflect. And in my imaginary administration of this instructional series, my reflection was that many students needed additional support in accuracy and verifiability. So I wanted to plan small group instruction on how to cross check sources. And then the partnership with social studies really worked well. So we want to continue that partnership across content areas. And then that's it. That's my whole cross-check method. And that was a lot. Yes, not an agreement, right? That's a lot to sit down and think through and plan and really work out. And that's why I prefaced it with don't do this for every single indicator. You'll make yourself crazy, right? Um, that is not the expectation, but choosing the indicators that maybe cause you trouble or ones that you really just enjoyed from 2015 and you want to make sure you still aligned, choose those indicator. And the good news, especially good news is that we've got resources for you. So on, I think, box 9 of your note catcher, there is a Wakelet. If you never use Wakelet, it's like Pinterest for teachers. So I've created a Wakelet that has lots and lots of cross-check resources for you. So presentation, if you wanted to go back and watch a cross-check presentation, video recording of the cross-check method. There is an example for each grade band, and I'm uploading these new webinar examples as well. You have a blank digital template as well as a blank PDF template. The glossary's in there, vertical articulation's in there. There's support documents for writing learning objectives, success criteria, and TDQs and CDQs. So all of that is in one place for you if this is something that you might want to think about walking through with a team of teachers. Again, we don't want to live in a silo. Find a partner. Find somebody who can partner with you and walk through this work together. So if you don't have cross-check method whiplash yet, we are going to walk into our clarity and closure. And I really just want you to think for a moment about what are you going to do moving forward? What 3 steps are we going to ask you to take? The first is to just explore the resources, dig in, see what all is on that Wakelet, see what could be helpful for you, what you could use, what you might need more of. Number 2, decide who could partner with you in this work. Do you want to tackle an indicator as a team, as a PLC group? How might you want to do this? And then finally, choose one indicator to start with, just one. And we all would like to extend at the end of each of these webinars the opportunity that if you do choose an indicator and you do go through the cross-check method, to share it with me. And I will be glad to provide feedback or schedule, 30-minute Zoom meeting. We can chat about what you walk through or any questions that you have, because we absolutely want to partner with you with this work. So I want you to just think for a second, maybe who you might partner with, what indicator you might want to tackle. And then in the chat, I'd like for you to share with me one thought that's swirling around in your head, whether it's this is overwhelming, I'm excited to try, whatever it may be. We'll do one final thought. Love the Wakelet. Yes, it's one of my favorite tools. Good, Jacqueline. Yes, the format. Sometimes it's nice to just have a structure. Like, just give me a structure. Absolutely. Great to work on a PLC, the scaffolding. Yes. Very powerful process. Yes, Sarah. I agree. And again, even as like a teacher, thinking back if I had my teacher hat on, ain't no way I would be able to do this with every indicator. But it is so powerful when you really think intentionally about the indicators and what the expectation is. We know the vertical articulation is so important with these standards. If every single grade level could be really, really intimately acquainted with their grade level expectation, this is going to be great. Very good. Absolutely. What's the actual expected process to get there? That indicator language, because that's what they're going to see on their EOC. That's what they're going to see on SC Ready. Very good. All right. I have one last thing that I will ask of you, and that is to please provide us some feedback. We will put the, I think this is on your note catcher as well, but here is the link in the chat. Take a moment, let us know how today was for you. Give us any feedback, any suggestions for the future. We are here to partner and connect with you, and we're so thankful that you chose to spend this Monday morning with us. Yes, Sophia. Thank you, Terry. And I have additional resources on CDQ and TDQ. So if you just email me, I can get those to you.
Can I ask a question for clarity?
Of course.
The Wakelet that you shared for the research, is it only for the research standard, and is there a separate Wakelet for like the applications of reading and foundations?
There
or
is
are they
not.
all the same?
They're all the same, but I have not added the other two in yet. It's on my to-do list, so you'll notice that it will grow as I add in the information from the other two. I'll put the webinar recordings as well as those examples in there.
Thanks.
You're welcome.